So, in this segment, we're going to be discussing former Johnson advisor Guter Harry telling Johnson to back off undermining Johnson Sunak over the protocol. And there's a lot I agree with what he's saying here, because Johnson has no idea of what he's dealing with in Northern Ireland.
I would urge anyone around Boris Johnson who thinks it's clever to sort of stir things up over this to just see the bigger picture and to back off.
Do you think Boris Johnson is trying to come back as Prime Minister?
I don't think he is actively trying to come back as Prime Minister. If in years to come there was an opportunity and there was a vacancy, then
But he hasn't waited for a vacancy in the past, has he?
I
mean, he hasn't.
May still be interested.
But you could argue...
Yeah, I think with Johnson, I don't think he's interested in coming back as Prime Minister right now, because he's making a lot of money on the speech circuit, and the rumours were he was going broke as Prime Minister because he didn't have access to second jobs and things like that, and that's where he made most of his money. He was paid way more outside of his kind of MP tasks. My man was living off off donors' money effectively. They were providing him meals to an extent, holidays, etc. So I think he's willing to wait, especially because it adds to his Churchill legacy as well. Churchill lost the election in World War II, was in the wilderness for a bit, and I think he came back. That's what maybe Johnson wants to do as well. Wait in the wings for a while and then come back and maybe lead his party to a glorious win again or something. I don't know. The guy's a lunatic.
Gitto, that one of the ways that he comes back is you foment trouble. I mean, if he has been speaking to the DUP and saying you don't want to accept this deal that Rishi has negotiated, that's not a great place to be, is it?
Now, what I've read Johnson has done is he's gone to the DUP and told them to resist the deal under the premise that if the UK passes the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which would allow ministers to unilaterally get rid of bits of the protocol, the theory that the Tories have, and it's not right, they think they can bully the EU into giving us a much better deal, and that's what Penny Mordaunt seems to believe. That's what Suella Braverman also seems to believe, that we can bully the EU into giving us a much better deal than the Northern Ireland Protocol, which we know isn't the case. But that's what Johnson seems to be telling members of the DUP.
You said if there, because we have no idea, and I haven't heard him say anything on
the briefing on the Sunday Telegraph, we're friends of. Now, you know what that means. You know how that works.
Yeah, sometimes there are a bunch of people who attach themselves to someone who don't necessarily reflect what that person genuinely feels and wants to do.
And this is nonsense, because Johnson's openly come out and said it now. He's openly come out and said we need to stick with the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. He's not mentioned the DUP too much, but I think that kind of says that Johnson believes that that we need to wait for the Protocol Bill, and he's happy to undermine Sunak in this situation.
I'm not going to deny that at some point in future, if the ball came loose, that Boris would want to be Prime Minister again. But I don't think that he actively wants to bring down Rishi Sunak, because he knows what it feels like for that to happen to you. He's seen the carnage of going from him to Liz Truss, and then from Liz Truss to Rishi Sunak, and he's not blind to the fact that most people in the United Kingdom would think if the Tory party were to change leaders again now, that they're not fit to be in office.
I think that's nonsense, because that's assuming Boris Johnson has empathy and he cares about his party and the country. That's nonsense. Boris Johnson cares about himself. He wanted to be world king, and the idea that Johnson believes in empathy, or he's like, I know what it's like to feel stabbed in the back, so I'm not going to do it to other people, is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. He sees this as the perfect opportunity to undermine Rishi Sunak and potentially get rid of him. I think Johnson wants to be a kingmaker for the next person in charge, but given the fact that he looks like he's telling the DUP not to agree to the deal, which the ERG have said, if the DUP don't back the tweaks to the protocol, they're definitely not going to agree to it. So this is nonsense. What he's saying here is nonsense, I think.
If we don't have civil war in Northern Ireland, if we don't have a trade war with Europe, if we manage to leave everybody sufficiently not dissatisfied, then that is a big prize in the current situation. And I would urge anyone around Boris Johnson who thinks it's clever to sort of stir things up over this to just see the bigger picture and to back off and to let the people in charge try and nail this one.
And I agree with him in large parts. Johnson should back off, but I think the problem is I don't think he will. I think he's that much of a narcissist. He thinks he can fix things. And, let's not forget here, if Northern Ireland is ripped out of the EU single market for goods, where do you put that border? And if as people keep saying, it will be up to the EU and Ireland to put a border up, and therefore they'll be breaking the Good Friday Agreement. I think that argument is nonsense. And I think the Americans will see it as nonsense. I think the EU will see it as nonsense, and I think even the United Nations would see it as nonsense. And I don't know what happens at that point. Things get real scary real quick. A police officer was shot recently. And they're saying they think it was the new IRA who did it. We're still waiting to know the exact details of what's happened here, what happened with that situation. But things can escalate very, very quickly in Northern Ireland. And so Boris Johnson does need to back off here. But I've got a feeling the DUP won't go back to Stormont regardless. And I've kind of listed that in other videos. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.